So this is our final project. We settled on the research question, how do certain factors such as breed, age, size, sex, etc., influence the likelihood of a dog being brought into a shelter in the US? We drew conclusions based on various physical attributes, behavioral and health traits, and other features including color and breed.
From a previous study, we found that while over 3 million dogs enter adoption centers every year, only about 2 million of them are adopted, while a third of them end up being euthanized.
So, for the hypothesis, we believe that owners tend to care more about the temperament of the dog rather than its physical appearance.
The data set we started from was a really large data set from Kaggle that was dogs for adoption on Pet Finder. So we cleaned it by removing unnecessary columns and also columns with missing data. And then to understand like where our data come from, we looked at the locations of the shelters, and we got this map, and we can see that there's a lot more dogs from the East Coast and more specifically New York and Pennsylvania. So we kept that in mind when analyzing the data.
We looked at the basic physical attributes of the dogs in shelters. We found that the proportion of younger dogs is much greater in the shelters than in the overall dog population. We found that there is no significant difference between the sexes in adoption centers. And we found that there's a disproportionately high number of medium-sized dogs compared to other sizes in shelters. And lastly, we found that there are way more short-coated dogs compared to other types of coats.
Next, we analyze the behavioral and health traits of the dog. This includes whether the dog was fixed, house trained, it had special needs, its vaccination records were updated, if it was trained in an environment with children, dogs, or cats. And then we also combine them all. So in this graph, we show how many of these seven attributes the dog had. And here is just some data regarding that. And then we also had data for each individual column of these seven. So we saw that the most dogs would come in without having special needs and having their vaccination records updated, while uh, most dogs would also come in not being house trained and not being trained in an environment with cats, which we attributed to most dogs being brought in for behavioral reasons and the fact that most households do not have both cats and dogs. And then here is just a heat map of correlations, and the largest correlation was between the environment of dogs and cats.
So, here we have the top 10 breeds and the visualization for it. And the top dog was the Labrador Retriever. Here we have the top five dog colors and the visualization for that. So black was the most popular color. And here we have a stacked bar chart that gives us a visualization of both of the data together. So here we have the relationship between age and breed. And here we have the relationship between breed and size distribution. And then lastly, we have the relationship between breed and coat distribution.
Next, for the ethics and privacy section, as we mentioned, we used petfinder.com, which is a reliable and ethical source. The only issue that we saw was that the data was all taken from a single day, which might cause some bias.
So for our conclusion, we found that the most important factors that predict if a dog will be put up for adoption are the dog breed and their behavioral traits. And then there were also patterns with coat length, color, and then dog size, but these were correlated with breeds. And then one concern we did have was that our data isn't representative of all of America. And it also doesn't have data about when the dogs were adopted and if they were adopted. So if we were to do more work on this in the future, we would want to look at that data to better understand what leads to dogs being adopted.